Chapter 249 of Shrimadbhagavatam. Jarasandha fights a duel. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Krishna, Arjuna and Bhima went to Giribraja. They had dressed themselves as Snataka Brahmins and they entered the fort by jumping over the wall. It was midday and this was the time when Jarasandha, who was an ardent devotee of Mahadeva, would finish his puja of the Lord and then would honor the Yachakas, those who had come to him for favors. These three from Indraprastha went to the courtyard where the Yachakas had assembled. Jarasandha entered the courtyard. They went promptly to him and said, "We have come from a great distance and we have hopes of our wishes being granted by you. Please grant us our wish." Jarasandha stood staring at them and he spoke not a word. They continued, "Nothing is unbearable for the patient. Nothing is impossible or wrong for the wicked. For the givers, there is nothing that cannot be given. For those who are blessed with the gift of looking on everything and everyone as equals, is there such a person as a stranger? If there is such a man who is capable of giving and does not acquire for himself fame and a lasting name by giving what has been asked, such a man is indeed pitiable and to be condemned too. The kings of yore, Harishchandra, Rantideva, the Brahmin by name Mudgala, the king Shibi, Bali the pigeon, which entered the hunter, are all remembered long after they are gone because of their giving." Jarasandha was quite intrigued by these strangers. Their garments were those of Snatakas, but their voices, their figures, their shoulders, which had been scarred as though by constant practice with bows and arrows, belied their Snataka appearance. Jarasandha thought to himself, "Surely these are not Brahmins. They must be Kshatriyas, and I have a feeling there is some mischief afoot. But it has been my rule never to refuse what a Brahmin asks for. And since these men who seem to be Kshatriyas, who seem to be too old to be Snatakas, are wearing the garbs of Brahmins, I have to give them what they ask for, even if it is my life. Have I not heard the story of King Bali? He knew that Vamana was Narayana, who had come to beggar him of all his wealth, which he had taken from Indra. But Bali would not hesitate. His fame is more alive than that of Vamana, who was but the receiver. What is the use of living with his body, which will die any moment, if one does not aid a Brahmin who asks me for a gift?" So thought Jarasandha, the noble, the great giver. He smiled at them and with magnanimity he asked, "Ask me anything you want, and I can assure you, you will not be disappointed. Even if you ask me for my head, I will give it." Krishna took a step forward and said, "If you are willing, we would like a duel with you. We are not Brahmins, and we are all three of us Kshatriyas, and we ask not for food, but for fight." Jarasandha said, "As soon as I saw you, I knew that you are not Brahmins. I am paying honor to the garb of a Brahmin, which each one of you have donned. That is the reason why I said I would give you anything you ask." He looked at Krishna and looked again. He then laughed loudly and said, "Your face seemed rather familiar. It is quite some time since I last saw you, and that is why I could not recognize you at once. Are you not the cowherd who killed his uncle?" He looked at the other two and said, "Who are these two youngsters? Are they cowherds too?" Krishna said, "You are quite right. I am the same cowherd who fought with you so often in those days. This young man is Bhima, the son of Kunti, and the other is Arjuna, his younger brother." Jarasandha said, Of course, I will fight with you since you ask for it. I refuse, however, to fight with a cowherd who was so scared to face me in battle that he fled to the middle of the ocean and is living there ever since in dread of me. As for this Arjuna, his frame is too young and too delicate. It will not be fair to choose him as my opponent in a fight. Bhima seems to be more fit. He seems bigger and he seems to be strong too. He might offer me some good fight. Jarasandha then asked for 2 gadas to be brought. One he gave to Bhima and the other he took in his hands. They came out into the open and began their fight. Both were equally matched and both of them were enjoying themselves while fighting. The sound which arose when they hit each other was like 2 elephants hitting each other or like 2 thunder clouds crashing against each other. Neither was inferior to the other, and it looked as though the fight would never end. For 28 days the fight went on. Their relationship was strange. During the nights they would all sit together like friends, and during the day they fought. One night Bhima told Krishna, "Look, Krishna, I do not think it will be possible for me to kill this Jarasandha. He is my equal in every way, and I am getting quite tired of this fight which promises to be eternal." Krishna said, "Tomorrow you will be able to kill him." The fight began once again. Once Bhima pushed Jarasandha to the ground and Krishna caught the eye of Bhima. Krishna had a leaf in his hand, and while Bhima was looking, he split the leaf into 2. Bhima at once understood what he had to do. Standing on one leg of Jarasandha, the fallen king, he took the other leg in his 2 hands and tore him into 2. The people saw that the king of Magadha was dead, and there rose up a mighty roar as of the sea breaking its bounds. Krishna and Arjuna embraced Bhima, who had achieved the seemingly impossible. Krishna crowned the son of Jarasandha as the king of Magadha, and the 3 of them went to the city by name Giri Vraja, where the many kings were imprisoned. They saw their deliverer, and their gratitude was so great that they could not talk. They could only weep and wash his feet with their tears. They thanked him with faltering words, and Krishna said, "I have kept my promise and released you from the captivity which Jarasandha had imposed on you. All I ask in return is that you should go back to your kingdoms and rule them well, without letting power go to your heads and make you forget righteousness. Later, when King Yudhishthira performs the Rajasuya, I would like you all to attend it and lend your support to him." Krishna left Girivraja accompanied by Bhima and Arjuna. The young prince Sahadeva, who had been crowned as the king, bade them farewell. Yudhishthira was thrilled when he heard the music of the conches, which they blew triumphantly when they reached the outskirts of Indraprastha. He rushed out with the others to welcome the heroes and brought them home with all honor. With all honor. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva. Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Chapter 250 of Shrimadbhagavatam. The Rajasuya Yaga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The 4 brothers of Yudhishthira were sent to the 4 quarters to proclaim the sovereignty of Yudhishthira. They returned with immense wealth, and they were mostly unopposed by the kings of the countries they visited. The reason was simple. Yudhishthira was respected by everyone because he was a righteous king, a very gentle and noble man who had undergone so many tribulations. Only now he had acquired the status of a king. They had no great objections to his performing the Rajasuya, and they were all willing to attend the Yaga. 1 or 2 kings opposed the Pandava princes, and soon they were vanquished and they paid their homage to the conqueror. They were asked to attend the yaga. Yudhishthira began the preparations for the yaga. He personally requested the rishis, who were all well versed in the rituals to be observed, the proper location of the yaga bhumi and similar things. The season was usually Vasanta, when the yaga was performed. All the rishis had agreed to attend. Vyasa, Bharadwaja, Sumanta, Kratu, Jaimini, Paila, Parasara, Parushurama, Vitihotra, and many other holy men. Yudhishthira sent his youngest brother Sahadeva to Hastina to invite Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, Drona, Kripa, Vidura, and the cousins Duryodhana and his brothers, as also Shakuni with Karna and Ashwatthama, the son of Drona. All the kings of Bharatavarsha had been invited, and soon, when Vasanta Rutu came, Yudhishthira was made to plough the Yagnashala himself on an auspicious day, and he was initiated into the rites preceding the yaga. The yaga began and proceeded without any trouble. The rishis from the heavens had come to watch the yaga, and Narada led the group. The pomp and glory of the function was talked about even in the court of Indra. It was said that it resembled the Rajasuya performed once by Varuna. At the conclusion of the yaga, a formality had to be observed. There had to be a special function where honor was paid to the foremost among the guests. Yudhishthira had honored everyone equally, and this was a task beset with a certain amount of embarrassment to him, to the recipient, and to the other great men who were apt to feel slighted by the so-called preferential treatment. As he was trying to solve this problem with the necessary amount of tact or diplomacy, Sahadeva, the youngest of the Pandavas, who was said to be the wisest of them all, stood up and said, "There is only one man here who has to be honored as the foremost among men, and that is Krishna. He is not just a man, he is the Lord himself who is walking on this earth with a form and a name for the good of foolish men like us. He is the foundation on which rests this entire universe. He is the soul of all yagas, of all the incantations. The speculations of all the Upanishads are about him, and he is the only one to be worshipped. He creates and he sustains. And finally, he is the one who destroys this universe entirely. Who is able to gauge his infiniteness, the immensity of his glory. If we honor Krishna, we will be honoring all living and non-living objects, since he is the Brahman which pervades the universe. Let us, by all means, honor Krishna as the foremost among men." All the wise men who had assembled there in the great hall were pleased with the words of Sahadeva. They knew the truth of his words, that Krishna was the Paramapurusha himself, and that he was the only one fit to be honored as the foremost among men. Yudhishthira was happy that the words of Sahadeva were approved by everyone. He had the same desire in his mind, and he had been trying to put that into words when Sahadeva spoke. With great joy in his heart, he began to offer puja to Krishna. He washed his feet with Draupadi, poured water from a vessel made of gold. The water which had wetted the feet of the Lord, he took and sprinkled on his head and on that of his wife and brothers. Years back, it was this same water which was named Mandakini and which was brought to the earth by Bhagirath and given the name Ganga. Yudhishthira's eyes were so full of tears that he could not look at Krishna when he stood before him with his palms folded and his thoughts flowing towards him. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Parnamast. Chapter 251 of Shrimadbhagavatam, Shishupala of Chedi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. "Enough of this foolishness," said a voice suddenly, and all the people in the hall were surprised. They had all joined in the worship of the Lord, And this was a sudden note of discord which no one expected. All eyes were turned in the direction from which the sound came. They found Shishupala, the son of Dhamagosha, standing up, his arm lifted up as if in remonstrance. His eyes were red with anger and his hand was trembling while he showed his disapproval. He began to speak despairingly of Krishna. He said scathing words about Yudhishthira also. "It is indeed true," he said, "that no one can alter the course of time. I can see now that the statement is true of those who have reached their old age too. The words of this youngster who has no experience of worldly things are excusable. He has been thrown in the company of Krishna and he feels that this man deserves to be honored. But what surprises me is the fact that the older men here, the veterans who should have better sense, have also let their minds be influenced by the words of Sahadeva. I appeal to the really wise men in this assembly. Please do not give your consent to this foolishness on the part of Yudhishthira. Use your powers of thinking and tell me in what way this man, this blot on the name of the Yadu house, this cowherd deserves this honor. There are so many great men here. The rishis who are rich in tapas, in knowledge, they have been honored by the celestials. They are sinless and they are forever absorbed in the contemplation of the Brahman. Ignoring them, Yudhishthira has foolishly paid honor to this man. His accepting the honor is like a crow snatching the havis that is meant for the devas. He belongs to no high family. Born in a prison and brought up in a cowshed, how can he be civilized enough to mix with kings? He does not know or observe even the common rules of conduct, and he is so willful he does not ask for the advice of his elders in his actions. There is not a single quality in him which can be spoken of highly. Think of the house to which he belongs. Yadu, the son of Yayati, was their ancestor. And Yadu was a son who would not listen to his father when he asked him for a favor. And the father was so displeased with him that he disowned him, his eldest son. The entire family is well known for its drunkenness and its thieving instincts. They are aloof from the countries where the Brahmarshis dwell, and they have a city in the middle of the sea. That itself shows how different they are from the others. This man is a cowherd, a thief, one who aspires to be a king when the world knows that they can never be kings. Such a man should not be honored in this assembly. Even ordinarily, he should not be honored. How then can he be called as the foremost among men? It is not true. This worship is all wrong. There was an awed silence when Shishupala finished his tirade. Like a lion which listens to the howls of a jackal, Krishna sat without any expression on his face. Many of the lovers of the Lord closed their ears with both their hands and walked out of the hall. It is the dharma prescribed by the ancients that a man, when he listens to insults aimed at the Lord or at the devotees of the Lord, if he does not walk out so that the words do not reach his ears, he will then be condemned to hell and all his punya will be snatched away from him. So terrible is this Bhagavat Ninda. The Pandavas were horrified by the words of Shishupala, and along with the Kekayas, Matsyas, Srinjayas, they reached out their arms for their weapons so that they could punish this man who spoke such blasphemy. Bhima could not bear it. He raised his gada and was trying to push towards Shishupala. Krishna signaled to all of them to be quiet, and he sat with that bland smile on his face. Bhishma spoke to Bhima and said, "It has been ordained that Shishupala should be killed only by Krishna. When he was born, the voice from the heavens prophesied this: the mother of Shishupala, who is your aunt, your mother's sister, has requested Krishna to falsify the prophecy and to spare her son. She thought that Shishupala would be spared. Krishna has told her that he will forgive 100 insults from her son. She was sure that her son would never reach that number and is therefore secure in her hope that her son will not be harmed. But look, by the side of Krishna is a heap of flowers, the very same flowers with which your brother worshipped him. Krishna has been dropping those flowers on the ground one by one, and the heap is now made up of more than 100 flowers. Krishna has to kill Shishupala now. Even as he was saying it, Krishna stood up suddenly. His face had lost its softness and gentleness. A frown like that of the frown on the sky sat on his noble brow, and he waited for the coming of Shishupala, who was rushing towards him with a sword in his hand, and with him came his followers. Everyone was looking on helplessly. They were speechless and breathless when Krishna took up his chakra and severed the head of Shishupala from his body. There was a roar as that of the sea if it had broken its bounds. Some wise men like Narada and Vyasa and Yudhishthira saw a glow emanate from the fallen body of Shishupala and moved towards Krishna. When it came near Krishna, the glow reached his feet and was lost to view. One of the doorkeepers of Vaikunta, Jaya, had gone back to the place he had lost ages ago when he was cursed by the Rishi Sanaka and his brothers. The Lord, in his infinite mercy, had released him from the third and last birth in the world of men and the world of sin, of pain and unhappiness. This long separation from the Lord was now over, and Jaya need never again be away from the side of Lord Narayan. The Rajasuya Yaga was over. The guests were all honored as was their due, and when he had performed all the necessary duties, Yudhishthira had concluded the Yaga. At the request of Yudhishthira, Krishna stayed on even after the others had left Indraprastha. A few weeks later, in spite of the remonstrances of the Pandava brothers, Krishna returned to his city, Dwaraka. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva. Shri Krishna Parnamast. Chapter 252 of Shrimadbhagavatam. Salva attacks Dwaraka. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Salva was a great friend of Shishupala. He had also gone to Vidarbha when Shishupala was invited by Rukmi. That was when they thought that Rukmini would become the bride of Shishupala. Krishna had carried her away. Since then, Krishna had been hated by Shishupala and all his friends. After the Rajasuya and the tragic death of his friend, Salva's anger against Krishna was immense. Because of Krishna, he had lost two of his good friends, Jarasandha and Shishupala. In his anger, he took an oath: I will make the earth Yadavaless. Salva went to the mountains, and there he performed severe tapas to please Lord Mahadeva. He would eat a handful of mud every day, and that was all the food he had had. Of all the gods, the easiest to please is Mahadeva. He was gratified by the penance of Salva, and he asked Salva what he wanted. Salva asked for a Vimana. It had to be unbreakable by the Devas, Asuras, human beings, Gandharvas, Nagas, or Rakshasas. It should go wherever he wanted it to go, earth, air, or water. It should be frightening to the Yadavas. Shankara granted it to him. Maya made it for him. The chariot was called Saubha, and it was given to Salva. It was not just a chariot. It was miniature city. Seated in this, Salva would be able to go wherever he wanted. Salva decided that the time had come when Dwaraka should be destroyed. He armed himself with all the weapons he had, and collecting a huge army, he went to Dwaraka and surrounded it on all sides. He was bent on destroying the entire city. The gardens, the gateways which were decorated beautifully, houses and turrets which had been designed by Vishwakarma, the walls which were meant to guard the city were all destroyed by Salva. Seated in his new chariot, Salva rained arrows and stones, small and big boulders from the mountains and various other things like serpents and vicious things on the city. He caused a big cyclone to be formed and the city could not be seen because of the dust which covered it. Krishna's city resembled the earth when the Asura named Tripura harassed it. Pradyumna, the son of Krishna, set out from the city to fight with Salva. He was accompanied by Satyaki, Sambha, Akrura and Kritavarma and several other Yadavas. A great battle was fought by Satyaki and others. The son of Krishna fought valiantly. Well versed as he was in Mahamaya when he was with Sambara, Pradyumna was able to tackle all the tricks of Salva. But the chariot by name Saubha was able to withstand all the arrows of Pradyumna. The chariot would be in the air and next moment it would descend on the earth, and before anyone could follow its path, it would streak into the air. At times it would be very big and at other times it would become exceedingly small. Salva would move so nimbly that they could not take aim at him and shoot arrows at him. He was proving too powerful for the Yadava heroes. No one could tackle him. Dyuman was the minister of Salva and he accosted Pradyumna. He hit Pradyumna with his gada, which made Pradyumna faint. His charioteer carried him away from the spot. When he regained consciousness, Pradyumna was furious with his charioteer because of this act. He said, Why do you do this? The enemy host will think that I ran away from the spot because I was afraid. It is a slur on the name of the house of the Yadavas. I am displeased with you. The charioteer, who was the son of Dharuka, said, There is nothing to indicate that you are afraid, O prince. The rules of war have declared that when a charioteer is in trouble, the warrior should protect him, and when the warrior is in trouble, it is a duty of the charioteer to do likewise. I have not brought shame to your name, do not worry. I will take you back to the forefront. Pradyumna encountered Dyuman again and killed him easily. The army of Salva was being destroyed systematically by the Yadava heroes. The battle went on for 27 days and yet Salva could not be killed. While Krishna was staying in Indraprastha after the Rajasuya, this was happening in Dwaraka. Ill omens were seen and Krishna felt that some bad event was taking place in Dwaraka. That was why he hurried to Dwaraka. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishnarpanamasti.